Well, you know when we see a stoic George Washington on a $1 bill or a dignified Abraham Lincoln on a 5, or see our modern presidents like Reagan or Kennedy strike their presidential pose, it's easy to think of our presidents as pretty serious fellows. Nevertheless, there was another side to many that wasn't always so serious and could actually be quite funny. Take Abraham Lincoln, for example. After the onset of the Civil War, with the North losing at Bull Run and Manassas, he wasn't very pleased with General George McClellan, commander of the Northern forces. He requested frequent updates on a daily basis about the progress he made each day, so that soon McClellan, tired of all of this, made no secret of his annoyance at Lincoln's intrusions and started to become a little over the top. The following exchange of letters demonstrates McClellan's sarcasm as well as Lincoln's legendary tenacity. Here's the first letter. To Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States, White House, Washington, D.C. Dear Mr. President, during our march south, I encountered 5 cows grazing in a green pasture. What should I do? Very truly yours, General George McClellan, Commander of Northern Forces, Potomac, Maryland. To which Lincoln responded, to General George McClellan, Commander of Northern Forces, Potomac, Maryland. Dear General McClellan, milk them. Very truly yours, President Abraham Lincoln, White House, Washington, D.C. Well, the subject of my talk today is presidential leadership in challenging times, not presidential humor. But let me begin by telling you how I came to choose this topic and why I believe the lessons that can be drawn from great presidents have application not just to business people, but to anyone interested in leadership, especially during these challenging times. Well, during my investigation, I came across an article that was really a find. It was in Fortune magazine, and it was about then-President Ronald Reagan, entitled, What Manager Reagan Can Teach Managers. It came from an article in 1986, by the way. It became, for me, a kind of treasure trove of valuable lessons in leadership, and proved to me that presidential leadership and leadership in business, or any kind of leadership you can contemplate, applies. There are lessons to be learned. So after reading the article, and later in my research, 2 things became apparent. First of all, I knew I was not going to become another Abraham Lincoln. That was apparent. What was also apparent was that most of my employees were not going to be new Abraham Lincolns either. But that's okay, because the second thing I learned in studying great presidents, character-driven presidents, was that the lessons that they'd master, the talents that they'd cultivated, and the way they approached, from a character-driven point of view, their positions, this was clearly something business leaders could learn from, and also everyday people in their day-to-day lives. Year after year, the presidents I've selected have been polled by historians, by the general population, as the best of the best, who during times of our nation's greatest crisis acted in accordance with character-driven leadership and were ultimately seen as great. John F. Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis, George Washington as Commander-in-Chief of the colonial forces, Abraham Lincoln in signing the Emancipation Proclamation, Theodore Teddy Roosevelt when he took on corporate monopolies, Franklin Roosevelt during Pearl Harbor and the Great Depression, and Ronald Reagan in bringing about the collapse of the Soviet Union. There may be some things each of us disagree on, maybe even this list of 6 great presidents, but one thing few would argue is that today, in 2009, like them, we face challenging times that require not mere management, a reshuffling of resources, but transformational leadership, a changing in the historical continuum. So come with me now on a journey where we explore and learn from key elements of the leadership exercised by 6 great American presidents. Nevertheless, each passed through what some have called the crucible of leadership, nearly insurmountable challenges that forced them to question who they were and what was important to them. Yet they tried, failed, endured, and ultimately succeeded. Why is this? The reasons vary, But one undeniable fact is that they learn from every failure and internalize those lessons to build a better self. Perhaps then escaping a corporate box or box of any description has much to do with having goals, learning from experiences good and bad, and never giving up. Good things happen to guys that don't quit, observed Massachusetts boxer Irish Mickey Ward, who at the age of 37 achieved his lifelong dream of becoming middleweight champion of the world. Far from the most skilled boxer, definitely past his prime, and probably a better philosopher than he was a fighter, Mickey Ward accomplished this goal of his simply by refusing to abandon it. Today our families, our country, and the world face massive challenges, some of which are traditional: war, genocide, the spread of weapons of mass destruction. Others that are non-traditional and perhaps even self-imposed, like global recession, unstable financial systems, and lack of faith in our institutions. Clearly these times and our history cry out for change, but it's not change forward so much as internal change within ourselves, away from situational leadership with its quick fix and quick gains, and onto the kind of character-driven leadership demonstrated by the great presidents we've discussed today, whose values, principles, and lives history has recorded for us to study, evaluate, and emulate. We waste so much of our time, money, energy on things that are fundamentally unessential to us: the car, the clothes, the club we belong to. Yet how much time do we spend building a better self? How many hours or minutes each day? And if ambitions like this do swirl through our heads, even on a weekly basis, what do we do about it? If answers to these questions don't generate a blaring mental response in the affirmative, perhaps we are in a kind of box, or in the midst of our own wilderness period, or perhaps we've never left the wilderness at all. Ultimately, great leadership begins with gathering the will to rise above one's own limitations. For in the end, there's something absurd about the fact that what there is to escape from is often actually, and ingeniously, a box constructed by ourselves. The true lesson to be learned from the study of great presidents is that great leadership in business and in life is up to each of us, just as it was up to Washington, Lincoln, T.R., Franklin Roosevelt, Kennedy, and Reagan. And that's why I'm optimistic about America and its future, despite the current economic environment. The reason is that never in the history of the world has there been a nation or a people so innovative, so resilient, and so determined to succeed as the United States of America during their presidencies, and now more than ever in 2009. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention.